Sir Tom Stoppard is a Czech-born English playwright, screenwriter, and director. He was born Thomas Straussler on July 3, 1937 in Zlín, Czechoslovakia, to Dr. Eugene Straussler and Martha Bykova. His parents were non-observant Jews and members of the thriving Czechoslovakian Jewish community. His father was employed as a staff doctor by the Bata Shoe Company, owned by the town's patron, Jan Antonin Bata. Fearing for his employees' safety amidst whispers of an invasion from Nazi Germany, Bata decided to have his Jewish employees, mostly physicians, transferred to branches of his firm outside of Europe. On March 15, 1939, the Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia, the same day Dr. Straussler and his family were fleeing to a Bata factory in Singapore. Unfortunately for the Strausslers, Bata's forward thinking could not keep them out of reach of the Axis forces forever. With Japan closing in on Singapore in 1942, Dr. Straussler had his wife and two sons, Tomas and Petr, sent to Australia. He remained and later died in Singapore, having volunteered his services as a physician to the British Army. The family was relocated again in 1941, evacuating to Darjeeling, India. There, Thomas and Petr were schooled at an American multiracial school. In the halls of Mount Hermon School, Thomas and Petr would become Tom and Peter. When Tom was 8 years old, his mother remarried British Army Major Kenneth Stoppard. Major Stoppard, a proud British patriot, gave the boys his English surname and moved the family to England. Here, he instilled young Tom with a deep desire to be considered an honorary Englishman. He hated feeling like an outsider to British culture, noting, "I fairly often find I'm with people who forget I don't quite belong in the world we're in. I find I put a foot wrong. It could be a pronunciation, an arcane bit of English history. Suddenly I'm there naked, as someone with a pass, a press ticket." This would later be reflected in his characters, who were frequently addressed by the wrong name or placed at the butt of jokes to do with the confusion of having two names or two identities.
You had me confused.
I could see I had.
How should I begin?
Address me?
My honored lord.
My dear Rosencrantz.
Am I pretending to be you, then?
Certainly not. Well, if you like, shall we continue?
My honored lord.
My dear fellow.
How are you?
Stoppard left school at 17, deciding instead to begin working as a journalist in Bristol. After a few years with the Western Daily Press, he was offered a position as a feature writer, humor columnist, and secondary drama critic at Bristol Evening World. This would be his introduction to the world of theater. At the Bristol Old Vic, he would form friendships with a young Peter O'Toole and director John Boorman early in their careers. Stoppard began writing short radio plays in the mid-1950s. By 1960, he'd written his first play, A Walk on the Water, later retitled Enter a Free Man when it reached the stage in London in 1968. He was extremely fortunate, as within a week of sending the script to his agent, he began receiving the kind of Hollywood-style telegrams that changed struggling young artists' lives. His first play was optioned, staged in Hamburg, and broadcast on British independent television in 1963. In 1962, Stoppard worked as a drama critic for Scene magazine in London. He wrote reviews and interviews, sometimes under the pen name William Boot, which he had taken from Evelyn Waugh's Scoop. In 1964, a grant from the Ford Foundation allowed him to spend 5 months writing in a Berlin mansion. This later evolved into his Tony Award-winning play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. The story follows the titular Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, or is it Guildenstern and Rosencrantz? Two friends of Hamlet as they try to make sense of the events of Shakespeare's original play, and more importantly, the role they're meant to play in it. The play highlights much of Stoppard's signature style, language play, and absurdism. Throughout the play, the pair joust verbally, playing with words, their meanings, intentions, and effects. They're quick to turn a phrase and make puns. The dialogue flow is very stream of consciousness, though at times it seems that the two main characters share one consciousness between them. This is further reflected by a constant confusion from other characters over which man is which, even to a point of forgetting their own names when it's just the pair of them. From the sidelines of Shakespeare's play, of which they have no direct knowledge and very limited instructions on how to participate, the pair wax idiotic at the randomness of the universe, the absolution of death, and the nature of art versus reality. The world they live in, as a piece of art, lacks the order and consistency that they expect from it. This is further analyzed by the tragedians. This is further analyzed by the tragedians, who perform the metaplay that This is further analyzed by the troupe of tragedians. I can't pronounce this word, all right? This is the version of it. Tragedians. This is further analyzed by the tragedians who performed the metaplay that Hamlet uses to reveal his uncle's crimes. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern find themselves at odds with the philosophy of the lead player of the troupe. They question the believability of theater and how the rules of art contradict the expectations of reality, specifically with the portrayal of death. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead opened in a National Theatre production at the London Old Vic to critical acclaim in April 1967. This skyrocketed Stoppard to star status overnight. In the following years, he would go on to produce several works for television, radio, film, and theater. Some of his other works include The Real Thing, Arcadia, Jumpers, and Travesties. He wrote one novel, Lord Malquist and Mr. Moon, in 1966, and later adapted Rosencrantz and Guildenstern into a 1990 film starring Gary Oldman, Tim Roth, and Richard Dreyfuss. This is his only credit as a film director. Stoppard co-wrote the screenplay for Shakespeare in Love, and though he went uncredited, he also co-wrote Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Steven Spielberg states that Stoppard was responsible for almost every line of dialogue in the latter. He worked with George Lucas again on Star Wars Episode III, Revenge of the Sith, which I think is awesome, and honestly a little unbelievable considering how bad the dialogue ended up being in that movie. Though once again, he went without any official recognition. His most recent radio production, Dark Side, was written for BBC Radio 2 to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon, which is also the inspiration for my Instagram handle. Stoppard's style is linguistically complex, as he is a self-proclaimed language nerd. He likes to play with words and names, their meanings, connotations, and intentions, as well as the comedy of misunderstandings. He is known for his use of dialogue to give his characters depth and from which to draw humor. He is notable for his absurdist works, which ponder deep existential themes like reality, death, consciousness, chaos, identity, and art, as well as art's role in portraying these ideas. He became known for works that would expand on existing works, sometimes as parodies, pastiches, or satires, or sometimes as spiritual successors. His work deconstructs preconceptions about art and life through the lens of absurdity. Through his career, he has amassed several honors and titles. He was knighted, and arguably given status of honorary Englishman, in 1997. He was awarded the Penn Pinter Prize for determination to tell things as they are, and was appointed president of the London Library in 2002, and later vice president in 2017. In July 2017, he was elected an honorary fellow of the British Academy, the UK's National Academy for Humanities and Social Sciences. He's also received plenty of recognition outside of England, having been given the Japan Art Association's Premium Imperial Prize for Theatre and Film in 2009. He participates or has participated in several organizations dedicated to the progression of the dramatic arts. 5 facts you should remember about Tom Stoppard. He lived in Czechoslovakia, Singapore, Australia, and India before England, and he wants to be considered an honorary Englishman. He worked as a journalist throughout his early career, becoming known for strained attempts at humor and unfashionable clothes rather than his writing. He has credits in theater, radio, literature, television, and film, including one director credit and uncredited dialogue work for Indiana Jones and Star Wars. He's a self-proclaimed language nerd, which is reflected in his often linguistically complicated and humorous dialogue. His work tackles deep existential themes like reality, death, chaos, identity, and art through a lens of absurdism.